The Ghost Ledger. Hello, I'm Jay Nickel Investigations, and this is an Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's true crime podcast, fictional episode of Who Done It Wednesdays. Back to the golden era of detective fiction and enjoy stories in the tradition of the greats of writing, from Agatha Christie to Raymond Chandler to John Creasy. These are short stories. I hope you enjoy. Chapter 1. I was nursing a double martini at Elwood's, a smoky joint that looked better after your second drink, when a dame walked in who looked like trouble. Not the kind that makes you bolt your door and grab your gun. No, this was the kind that sidles up to your life, smiles, and leaves you wondering what got stolen. She made a beeline for my booth, all legs and secrets. I tipped my hat back and gestured to the seat across from me. Nick Monday, she said, sliding into the booth. Her voice was velvet, dipped in whiskey, with just enough husk to make you lean closer. Private investigator, right? Only on days that end in Y, I said. Who's asking? Clara Trent, she said. The name didn't mean a thing to me. The diamonds hanging from her wrist told me she wasn't window shopping. I need your help. Help costs money, I said, finishing my drink. What's the problem? My husband is dead. Congratulations. Her smile thinned. Murdered. Condolences, I said. That's not usually a privatized racket. That's for the boys in blue. She reached into her bag, pulled out a wad of cash, and laid it on the table, like a bribe to St. Peter. They think it was a robbery gone wrong. They're wrong. It was murder. I stared at the cash, then at her. Start from the beginning, Mrs. Trent. Miss Trent, she corrected. The late Mr. Trent and I were between engagements. We weren't exactly friendly anymore, but I know when something's fishy. And you think the fishy thing isn't the robbery part? She nodded. It wasn't a robbery at all. It was staged. Staged? By whom? She leaned closer, her perfume a mix of jasmine and something sharper, like a warning. By him. Trent did it himself. I blinked. You're saying your ex-husband robbed himself? That's right, she said. He faked the whole thing for the insurance money. Only something went wrong. Very wrong. Chapter 2. 6 feet under. I signaled the waiter for another round. Clara Trent didn't strike me as the kind of woman who wasted time with wild stories, but her tale had more holes than a dartboard at closing time. Let me get this straight, I said as the waiter slid another martini my way. Your ex-husband faked a robbery to cash in on the insurance. Then he ends up dead. Now you want me to prove it. Exactly. I took a sip, watching her over the rim of the glass. What makes you so sure he staged it? Why do you care? You said you weren't exactly friendly anymore. Her eyes flickered just for a second, but long enough to make me think there was more to the story. I have my reasons, she said finally. Let's just say I know Trent better than anyone. He wasn't exactly a saint. He had debts, big ones, the kind that don't go away with polite requests. He needed that insurance payout to square things with some very dangerous people. And the robbery was his way of getting the cash? She nodded. Told me about the plan a few weeks ago. Said he'd break into his own office, smash up the place, make off with some bogus, valuable documents. The insurance would cover the loss and he'd be in the clear. But now he's 6 feet under, I said. So something went sideways. Exactly. I think whoever killed him wanted those same documents he was faking. Only they weren't a fake. Now we were getting somewhere. I leaned forward. What kind of documents are we talking about, Miss Trent? The kind that ruin lives, she said, her voice low. A ledger? Trent kept detailed records of every crooked deal he ever made. Names, dates, amounts. It was his insurance policy in case anyone tried to double-cross him. Now it's missing, I guessed. She nodded. Whoever killed him has it. And if it gets out, let's just say a lot of powerful people will want it buried. Along with you, I said. She gave me a smile, didn't reach her eyes. Exactly. I drained the rest of my martini and stood up. All right, Miss Trent, I'll take the case. If this thing gets ugly, and it will, I'm charging double. Money's not a problem, she said, sliding the wad of cash across the table. Just find that ledger, Mr. Monday, before someone else finds me. Chapter 3. The investigation begins. I started where any self-respecting gumshoe would, Trent's office. A small cramped space in a building that smelled like mildew and bad decisions. The police tape was still up, but a $5 bill slipped to the janitor got me inside. The place was a mess, papers scattered, desk drawers yanked out, the safe cracked open. Whoever had staged the robbery had done a convincing job. Too convincing. I poked around, careful not to leave any fingerprints. The safe was empty, but the floor nearby was littered with scraps of paper. Most were junk, receipts, invoices, things no one would care about. But one caught my eye. A torn corner of a ledger page with faint pencil marks on it. I stuffed it in my pocket and kept looking. The desk yielded nothing but a broken pen and an empty bottle of scotch, but the trash can was more promising. Amid the crumpled papers was a matchbook from a club called the Velvet Room. I knew the place. A fancy speakeasy downtown where the drinks were overpriced, the clientele was shady enough to blot out the sun. If Trent had been there, it wasn't for the ambiance. As I stepped out of the office, I felt a chill run down my spine. Someone was watching me. I glanced over my shoulder and spotted a figure in a fedora leaning against a lamppost. When our eyes met, he ducked into an alley. I followed, my hand on the revolver in my coat pocket. The alley was dark, the air thick with the smell of garbage and something metallic. The figure was gone, but a single clue remained. A cigarette, still smoldering on the ground, the lipstick stain on the filter. Clara Trent wasn't the only dame in this story. If I wasn't careful, I'd be the next one written out of it. Chapter 4. Knack for Numbers. I didn't head straight to the Velvet Room. Clubs like that were best approached with a game plan, not in a whim. Instead, I decided to chase a quieter lead. The torn corner of the ledger page was burning a hole in my pocket. That was the key to this case. It was time to find out what it unlocked. I swung by my friend Charlie Harker's place. Charlie was a bookie with a photographic memory and a knack for numbers. If anyone could make sense of a scrap from Trent's ledger, it was him. Charlie's office was the back room of a pawn shop on 6th Street. The front was all dusty guitars and pawn wedding rings, but the back was where the real business happened. When I walked in, Charlie was hunched over a stack of betting slips, his stubby fingers flying over a worn calculator. "Nick," he said without looking up, "if you're here for tips, I'm tapped out. The ponies are running crooked this week." "I'm here for your brains, not your bad picks," I said, tossing the scrap of paper onto his desk. Charlie picked it up, squinting at the faint pencil marks. "What's this, a treasure map?" "Could be. It's from a ledger, one that might have gotten a man killed. Can you make anything of it?" He studied it for a long moment, then grabbed a magnifying glass. This isn't just scribbles, it's shorthand. Old school, too. See these marks here? They're numbers, but coded. This symbol means a transaction, and this one's a date. It looks like February 8th, $25,000. 25 grand? That's not pocket change. Charlie nodded. Looks like a payoff. The kind you don't report to Uncle Sam. Any way to tell who it went to? He shook his head. Not from this. But whoever kept this ledger knew how to cover their tracks. They didn't write names, just initials. This one's marked VR. VR, I repeated, feeling the pieces shift in my head. The Velvet Room. Charlie gave me a sharp look. If that's where this trail leads, tread lightly, Nick. That place doesn't just cater to shady types. It breeds them. Thanks for the tip, Charlie, I said, pocketing the scrap. Keep this between us, will you? You got it. And Nick, he says I reached the door. Watch your back. Chapter 5. The Canary. Before heading to the Velvet Room, I decided to check in on another angle. Claire had Trent and mentioned her ex-husband's debts. Debts always come with collectors. I called in favor of the snitch named Benny the Canary Larson. The guy could smell trouble like a bloodhound. We met at a diner off 4th Street, the kind of place where the coffee tasted like boiled tar and the waitress called you hun. Benny was already halfway through his stack of pancakes when I slid in the booth across from him. Nick, my favorite detective, he said, grinning with syrup-stained teeth. What's the buzz? Trent, I said. He owed money, big money. I need to know who was holding his leash. Benny leaned back, his grin fading. Trent, huh? Yeah, I heard he got himself offed. Word is he was into some nasty stuff. Loans from a guy named Rizzo. Real piece of work. Runs numbers out of a pool hall on the west side. Rizzo. Sounds charming. Think he had a reason to bump off Trent? Maybe, Benny said. But if Rizzo wanted him dead, he wouldn't have left a mess like that. Too public. Rizzo's the type to make you disappear. If Trent's murder was loud, it wasn't Rizzo. I frowned. So who else might have had a reason? Benny shrugged. Could be anyone. Trent wasn't exactly winning friends and influencing people. But if I were you, I'd look closer at that ex-wife of his. She's got claws. I'll keep that in mind, I said, tossing a few bucks on the table. Stay out of trouble, Benny. No promises, he said, grinning again. Chapter 6. Back to the Velvet Room. The Velvet Room was as gaudy as I remembered. Red velvet drapes, gilded mirrors, and a bar that looked like it had been carved out of solid gold. The place reeked of money, and the people reeked of desperation. I slid onto a stool and signaled the bartender. Bourbon. Neat, I said. As he poured, I scanned the room. The crowd was a mix of high rollers and lowlifes, all pretending they belonged there. That's when I spotted her, a tall blonde in a sequined dress, sitting in a corner booth. She was smoking a cigarette, the same brand I'd found in the alley by Trent's office. Her lipstick matched the stain on the filter. I grabbed my drink and made my way over. Mind if I join you, I asked, sliding into the booth without waiting for an answer. She looked me over, her blue eyes cold and calculating. That depends, she said. Who are you and what do you want? Nick Monday, I said. I'm looking into a dead man named Trent. He seemed like someone who might know something about that. She smiled but didn't reach her eyes. I've heard the name. But why would I know anything about him? Maybe because you were outside his office the night I was there, I said, leaning forward. Or maybe because your initials are VR. Her smile froze, and for a moment I thought she might bolt. But then she leaned back, blowing a stream of smoke into the air. Got a good memory, Mr. Monday. If you're looking for answers, you're asking the wrong questions. Why don't you point me to the right ones? She Crushed her cigarette in the ashtray and stood up. Ask yourself this, Mr. Monday. If Trent faked a robbery, who else knew about it? And what would they do to make sure no one else found out? With that, she disappeared into the crowd, leaving me with more questions than answers, and a sinking feeling that I was playing a game where everyone else had the rules, but me. Chapter 7. Unraveled. Mysterious blonde left me with more questions than a politician at a press conference. The night wasn't getting any younger. I decided to follow her. She moved through the velvet room like a ghost, all sequins and smoke, and she slipped out the back door. I gave her a minute before heading after her, my handbrush and the revolver in my coat pocket. The alley was dark. The air had a bite to it. She was already halfway down, her heels clicking against the pavement. I stayed in the shadows, careful not to spook her, until she turned and ducked into a side door that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. I waited, counting to 10, then followed. The door led to a stairwell that reeked of mildew and regret. At the top, I found myself in an office that looked like it hadn't seen a dust rag in decades. The blonde was there, perched on the edge of a desk, lighting another cigarette. She didn't seem surprised to see me. You're persistent, Mr. Monday, she said, exhaling smoke. I'll give you that. Comes with the job, I said. Now why don't you tell me who you really are? What you know about Trent? She smiled, this time with a hint of something real. You're sharper than you look. My name's Veronica Rain. I was involved with Trent. Once upon a time. Involved how? She shrugged, letting the cigarette dangle between her fingers. Business, mostly. A little personal. That was before he decided to get cute with the ledger. Ledger, I said. You mean the one he used to keep track of every shady deal he ever made? The one that's missing? That's the one, she said. Told me about it once in a moment of weakness. Said it was his get-out-of-jail-free card. He didn't count on it being a bullseye in his back. She knew about the fake robbery, I said, piecing it together. And you knew it was a cover for him to make the ledger disappear? She nodded. I also knew he wasn't smart enough to pull it off alone. Someone else was helping him. Someone who wanted the ledger for themselves. Clara Trent, I said, the pieces clicking into place. Veronica shook her head. No, not her. Clara might have her claws, but she didn't have the guts for this. No, it was someone closer to Trent's business dealings. Someone like Rizzo. Rizzo, I said, letting the name hang in the air. But if Rizzo had the ledger, why kill Trent? Why not just take it? Veronica's smile faded. That's the question, isn't it? My guess? Trent tried to double-cross him. Maybe he planned to sell the ledger to the highest bidder instead of handing it over. Rizzo doesn't take kindly to being played. And you, I said, what's your angle in all this? Why follow me? She stubbed out her cigarette and stood up, her eyes hard. Because I need the ledger too, Mr. Monday. For reasons you don't need to know. If you find it, you better be careful who you give it to. The thing's a bomb, and everyone wants the match. Before I could press her further, she slipped past me and out the door, leaving me alone in the dusty office. I let her go. Something told me I wasn't done with Veronica Rain yet. Chapter 8. The Ledger's Resting Place. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I went back to Trent's office. This time with fresh eyes. I'd overlooked a hidden compartment in the safe. A trick panel that slid open when you pressed the right spot. Inside was a ledger, a thick black book with Trent's scrawl on every page. As I flipped through it, I saw the names of half the city's power players, politicians, businessmen, gangsters. Rizzo's name was all over it, along with payouts, blackmail schemes, and evidence that could ruin careers and then lives. That's when I heard the floor creak behind me. I spun around, gun in hand, to find Clara Trent standing in the doorway. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. "You found it," she said, her voice trembling. "That I did," I said. "Care to explain why you really hired me?" Her mask slipped. For the first time, she looked vulnerable. "I needed it back," she said. "Trent promised me he'd destroy it after the divorce, but he didn't. He kept it as leverage to keep me quiet." "Quiet about what?" She hesitated and said, "He wasn't just blackmailing the city. He was blackmailing me. I helped him launder money. If this got out, I'd go down with him." I lowered the gun, but only a little. "So you're telling me you didn't kill him?" She shook her head. "I swear I didn't. I knew someone would if they found out about the ledger. That's why I needed you to find it before they did." "And Veronica Rain?" I asked. "Where does she fit into all this?" Clara's face hardened. "She's the one who sold him out. She told Rizzo about the ledger. She's been playing both sides from the start." Chapter 9. The Double Cross. It all came to a head that night in Rizzo's pool hall. I walked in with the ledger under one arm and a chip on my shoulder. Rizzo was there, flanked by his goons, with Veronica standing by his side like a queen in a crooked chess game. "Mr. Monday," Rizzo said, his voice slick as oil. "Have you been busy?" "You could say that," I said, tossing the ledger onto the table. "That's what you're looking for?" Rizzo's eyes lit up, but Veronica stayed cold. She knew there was a catch. "Here's the deal," I said. "You take this ledger and let Clara Trent walk. She's got nothing left to give you. And if you got everything you need." Rizzo smiled but didn't reach his eyes. "What about you, Monday? What do you get out of this?" "Just the satisfaction of seeing this thing out of my hands," I said. "It's bad news. I've had enough of that for one lifetime." For a moment, the room was dead silent. Then Rizzo nodded, and his memory relaxed. But as Veronica reached for the ledger, I pulled my gun. "Not so fast," I said. "I said you could have the ledger. I didn't say you could walk out with it." Before anyone could react, the sounds of sirens filled the air. I tipped off the cops on my way over, and they weren't in the mood for negotiations. The room erupted into chaos. Rizzo's men scattered. Veronica vanished into the shadows, and the cops stormed in, guns drawn. In the end, the ledger went straight to the boys in blue, and Rizzo went down for enough crimes to keep him locked up for 2 lifetimes. Epilogue. A week later, I was back at Elwood's, nursing another martini. Clara Trent had skipped town. Veronica Rain was nowhere to be found. The city was a little quiet without Rizzo pulling the strings. As for me, I'd walk away with nothing but a headache and a healthy distrust of ledgers. But that's the life of a private eye. You don't always get the glory. At least you get to see how the story ends. And sometimes, that's enough. Thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed these videos and podcasts, please consider subscribing to Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's True Crime Podcast. Available wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, and don't forget to tune in daily for new episodes.